Good evening. I'm Rob Maness, a retired colonel from the United States Air Force. Served for over 32 years in my enlisted and officer career, and have commanded at 3 levels, at least twice in combat. And I'm very proud to be part of the Weaponization Watch team that's being led up by the Patriot Freedom Project, Cynthia Hughes and John Schlafly of Eagle Forum. I'm here because there is a weaponization aspect to the Department of War's institutions. And it goes back to what we've seen with the treatment of folks from the unlawful COVID vaccine order, and that 8,000 plus individuals that were forced out of the military because they had either a religious exemption that they wanted to get past, a decision based on their religion, or a medical decision because it was an emergency use authorization medication that's not supposed to be allowed to be forced on anybody, let alone our military individuals. Well, that weaponization, believe it or not, folks, continues. I want to brief you up real quickly on the case of Brigadier General Chris Sage. I interviewed him on my show on December 29th because he was forced to retire, even though he had been promoted to Major General, the 2nd star level, but had been removed from the list by the Biden auto pen system. He was forced to retire on the 31st of December 2025 and is now out of the Air Force. But it was because 4 years ago, he made good decisions as a commander in combat in Iraq to take care of his people, but they were in opposition to the standard and somewhat wacky COVID policies, like having to wear a mask out on the flight line in the desert heat under airplanes that have engines running, and you can literally see the heat coming off of the aircraft. That was just dumb for that policy, and General Sage removed that policy when he took command of that unit. Folks that had tested positive for COVID were put in a tent surrounded by the same type of razor wire that you see at maximum security prisons. And when he saw that, he gave an order to remove that razor wire and went in and visited with those folks that had tested positive for COVID, because every human being should be treated humanely. And it was inhumane to treat these folks as prisoners, and that's exactly what he told his people. But the Inspector General system was weaponized against Chris back in those days, and he got an Inspector General complaint, series of complaints against him that had to be investigated. And unfortunately, the political appointees and the investigator, who never even came to the site where these incidents occurred, did his entire investigation from his computer in the Pentagon, even though General Sage was stationed overseas, substantiated these claims when they shouldn't have. Well, the President and Secretary Hegseth directed that the department give reinstatement opportunities for folks that were affected by the unlawful COVID vaccine order, and General Sage applied to the Air Force Board of Military Records Correction, the BCMR, and the board actually agreed with him that the IG complaint investigation was wrongly substantiated, and there really were no facts that supported it, so they overturned it. They also said that he should get his 2nd star back that he had made, that, remember, the Biden auto pin had removed him from the list so he couldn't pin it on. That's what drove his forced retirement. But here's the kicker, folks. There are thousands of younger and more junior men and women that have been adversely affected by these policies and this type of activity beyond General Sage, and he's just the symbol. He's the face of it because of his rank and his status. We need to make sure we're keeping those kinds of people or getting them back in the service, and here's why. Because they are the ones that demonstrated what's called moral courage. The courage of their convictions. When they knew that something was wrong, they stood up and they did the right thing and they made the right decision. Especially somebody like a commander in combat, making the right decision to take care of his people so that they could get their mission completed and go out and find and kill America's enemies, as we asked them to do on our behalf. That's the kind of men and women we want in charge of our military. So the Inspector General system is still being weaponized, and we need to get a Trump-appointed Inspector General in the Department of War and staff there so that we can fix that. The second thing that's going on, I just want to spend a couple minutes about it, is that the largest change in the Uniform Code of Military Justice was made in 2022, and it took the commanders, the unit commanders, out of the loop of the decision process on charging and those kinds of things for major crimes like rape, sexual assault, murder. And unfortunately, that is the most vast change that we've ever seen, but it gives the corporal's veto, so to speak, to somebody junior if they say, well, so-and-so touched me inappropriately with an unsubstantiated allegation, but that reform, taking the commanders that are the non-lawyers out of the system that make those kinds of decisions, stands in opposition to the lawyers, which we've already seen a lot of the military lawyers fired by Secretary Hegseth, and vice versa. A senior person could do the same thing to a junior person in that type of reform, and unfortunately it's already in place. So I'm calling on the Secretary of War to, sir, we've got to do a review of the UCMJ system to make sure that those folks that are operating in that system are doing it appropriately and ethically, because we have this challenge where commanders have been removed from this process, and we need to get them put back in place, because that's what's best for good order and discipline, and that's what military law, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is all about. You can't have the lawyers be able to make all the decisions, because the lawyers' objectives, by and large, may be different than the commander's objectives. The attorneys, the prosecutors, they want to win, but the commander may have a person that he or she has the ability to save that person so they can have a productive and long career serving our country and accomplishing the missions that we give them, instead of being convicted unnecessarily, and in a lot of cases with very, very little to no evidence, just because of the system reforms that have been put in place since 2022. That's about where we're at from a weaponization perspective of the institutions in the Department of War. And I'll leave you with this. The COVID vaccine is much more damaging than the American people realize. Over 95% of America's armed forces took the COVID vaccine, and the physical adverse reactions still haven't been fully discovered, and they're not being fully acknowledged either in the Department of War or the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we need to address that issue. Thank you very much.